Now, the latest from Westminster with Politics Live.
It's Tuesday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Rishi Sunak launches the Conservative Party Manifesto.
The question now is, who is best to turn that foundation into a secure future for you, your family and our country?
Further tax cuts and help for home buyers are also promised. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer says this.
And they're building this sort of Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto where anything you want can go in it. None of it is costed.
Under a Labour government, there'll be no increase in income tax, no increase in national insurance, no increase in VAT.
But would a Labour government increase capital gains tax? And should these energy drinks be completely banned for children?
We're talking about 3-4 shots of espresso in one of these tins, loads of sugar, right? So absolute nightmare.
Joining us today, former Conservative Minister Steve Brine, Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth, businessman and entrepreneur Dave Fishwick, and Reem Ibrahim from the free market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs. This is Politics Live Election 2024. Yes, hello. As we come on air, the Tories are still launching their election manifesto. You can see there the Prime Minister at the lectern. He's given a speech to launch it at Silverstone, the home of the British Grand Prix. Members of the Cabinet have taken a precious day off their campaigning to join him. Rishi Sunak still in the driving seat as he presents the party's offer to voters in a bid to move the polls in his direction. They've remained broadly unchanged since the start of the campaign, with Labour 20 or so points ahead. Now, we'll come back to the manifesto in some detail in a few minutes' time. We're going to talk, hopefully, to the Business Minister from there, Kevin Hollinrake. But first of all, Steve, just a sort of brief word about the location, the choice of venue of Silverstone, the racetrack. I mean, the metaphors speak for themselves. They write themselves, you know, coming off the tracks, going round and round in circles, getting lapped. Why do you think that was chosen?
Or symbolic of a Brad Pitt film that's being done today, which shows that we lead the world in creative industries. Depends on your negative or otherwise mindset. But actually, if you look at the set that he's doing it could be anywhere, couldn't it, really? I mean, we were told it's the Silverstone, but actually it's the same set as anywhere. I'm quite pleased that we've got to manifesto time. We haven't got anyone yet talking about sharks and boats, reference to Donald Trump in America, but I don't think it has been intellectually challenging enough, this campaign so far. So the manifestos are a chance to really dive into some detail and some policy, and maybe put some scrutiny on the opposition, who are, as you say, 20 points ahead, and they need scrutiny as well as the government.
Oh, well, perhaps we can make this programme intellectually challenging enough for you.
Always
and
is,
Joe. Steve, rise to the challenge. Anyway, before we get into it, let's just show you this in the Daily Telegraph. Labour to ban energy drink sales to under 16s. The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says party would be far more interventionist when it comes to children to protect their health. Reem, what do you make of the plan?
I think it's a really awful plan. I do understand
the intention.
Awful plan. A really awful plan.
Okay.
And look, I do understand the intention behind it. It's sort of this idea that we're going to protect children on the basis that energy drinks are bad for them. Now, there are many other products across on the market that are, of course, bad for young people and bad for children, and indeed bad for all of us. Energy drinks have approximately the same amount of caffeine as coffee. There's no more than that. So are we also going to ban coffee for under 16s? Are we going to ban fruit juice for under 16s? You know, if we're going to apply this logic consistently, that's where we end up.
Jonathan?
I think it's a really important announcement. And putting children's health first will be a huge priority of a Labour government should we get elected. It's something I'm particularly passionate about, and I'm really pleased to see this announcement today. As you know, for donkey's years, I was the Shadow Health Secretary, and children's health was one of my driving passions, not just childhood obesity, children's dental health, issues around addiction and how that impacts on children. I think it's a really important announcement. And on this point about are you going to ban coffee and all that, no, we're not. These drinks, they are targeted at children. My own children are always hassling us as we go around the supermarket to buy these sorts of drinks. We have teachers complaining about the impact these drinks are having on children's concentration. To be fair, the government did announce it. They were going to do it as well a few years ago.
Well, you've just put a thumbs up there, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Labour's policy, it's mine, actually. John was Shadow Health Secretary at the time. I wrote it in the Child Obesity Plan, Part 2 of the Child Obesity Plan, which I wrote when I was Minister in the Department of Health. I mean, look, it's good. We consulted on it, didn't then carry it through into actual policy. Should have. I was unhappy about that at the time, as you well know. It needs to come as part as a package on child obesity, which I hope, and I've seen that the mission that Labour Party have put together around preventative public health, and I've said that I think that it's the right direction, and I hope that you will actually do it if you win. But it needs to come alongside, the watershed advertising and a much wider plan, because ultimately this is a publicly funded health system. We therefore have a right and a responsibility to intervene in public health, because it becomes our problem when we don't.
Dave?
Better education's needed, I feel, to make better life decisions, not just about health and drinks and energy drinks and things, although they are very addictive and these things do need to be kept a very, very close eye on. But we also need better education around the finance, banking and around APRs, annual percentage rate. We need to teach young people and get them ready for life skills.
I'm all pro better education, but I'm not pro banning and effectively nannying people. Now, I see you mentioned the fact that your children, jump at the idea that they could drink a prime drink or those other very popular energy drinks that young people are sort of wanting. As a parent, it's your responsibility to then say, no, that's bad for you, and teach your children about a balanced diet.
Back to the education again, isn't it?
I think it's ridiculous that we are constantly calling out governments to ban things.
Yeah, but I wouldn't let my kids buy a can of Stella. On your argument, you'd let them buy a can of Stella.
It's already illegal for children to buy a can of Stella.
Yeah, no, but your argument is,
We're talking about alcohol and sugar. You're talking about sugar as though it's an addictive substance.
But you're making a libertarian point.
As alcohol, but it absolutely isn't.
A huge diabetes problem in this country, a huge obesity problem. This is storing up huge problems for individuals on their personal health, but have a huge impact on the National Health Service as well.
Especially the dentists that's been talked about just recently. They're really struggling with it.
But Dave, are you in favour of a ban on this or not? Just to be
clear. Do you know what I think? I think first and foremost we need to give people the education to then make their own decision. We can't become a nanny state. We can't tell people you can have this and you can't drink that. What we can do is educate them properly to understand the benefits and the non-benefits, and then they can make a decision based on common sense.
Unfortunately, it seems as though the consensus across both main parties, across politics, is that the government needs to be stepping in to tell people what they can and cannot do.
There's good reason for that, because the evidence suggests that it's the right thing to do. And look, I get it, the IEA, Liz Truss, Big Health didn't want us to bring in the legislation around smoking, which was lost in wash up. That was what they described it as. There was absolutely need for more interventionist
I believe in adults making their own decisions.
There is a need for interventionist public health policy because ultimately our health
and our health service depends on it.
Don't talk to each other. Try and talk across the... Well, do talk to each other, but one at a time.
It's not got intellectual so far.
Steve Bryan.
Not enough.
We're just going to show you again the scene at the Manifesto launch. The Prime Minister still taking questions and talking to the audience there. Now, last night, Rishi Sunak did a sit-down interview with the BBC's Nick Robinson in one of those first one-on-one interviews. He was asked broadly why voters should trust the Conservatives with another 5 years when they had failed to deliver on a number of key issues. Rishi Sunak insisted his government had started to make progress. And today he obviously hopes the promises in the manifesto will persuade voters to give the party another look. Steve, is this election a verdict on the past or a vote on the future?
Every election is a bit of both, especially for the incumbent anyway. And, if Labour win, then they will be the incumbent next time and they will have to answer their record. So there are many things that Rishi Sunak will be saying at the Manifesto launch today around, 90% of schools are now good or outstanding. That's happened under our watch. Yes, taxes have gone up during that time.
And they're continuing to.
I don't remember John's party arguing against the furlough scheme, for instance, when we decided to pay people's wages in the face of a national pandemic, when we had a lockdown and took, 10% of our economy overnight. That was the right thing to do. And of course, there was an impact to us economically from that. But the Prime Minister's point is that the economy has turned the corner. I think you will see rates come down later this year. And he has already made interest rates. I think
interest rates.
The Fed make a move, and I think the Bank of England make a move. And you've already seen us start to cut taxes, and he's saying the direction of travel is to do so more. So yes, it's about the future, and it's about some of the stuff on the record.
Jonathan, is it a verdict? You'd like it to be a verdict, rightly or wrongly, on 14 years of Conservative rule of the country? Or is it about a vote on the future?
Well, it is, as Steve says, a bit of both. And I think what we've seen so far is we've seen unveiled is what I think is a desperate wish list of promises they cannot fund, from savings they cannot find, because the money is not there. And what you will get with Rishi Sunak, if he is re-elected, is 5 more years of chaos in these future years. Chaos that will be paid for by working families in terms of higher mortgages to pay for this long litany of unfunded promises he's making today in this desperate way. That is the reality of it.
Just before I come to you, Dave and Reem, let's just listen to a little bit of what Rishi Sunak has been saying at the launch.
We will pay for permanent reductions in taxation by controlling the unsustainable rise in working age welfare that has taken off since the pandemic. In this party, we believe that it is morally right that those who can work do work, and that hard work is rewarded with people being able to keep more of their own money. So we will ensure that we have lower welfare so that we can deliver lower taxes.
Well, there's Rishi Sunak. I've just been handed the manifesto itself, the Conservative and Unionist Party Manifesto 2024. You can see it here. Clear plan, bold action, secure future. Those are all of the sort of taglines, if you like, of the election campaign for 2024. Some bedtime reading for our guests. I'll be looking through it this afternoon. But Dave, first of all, do you think this is a vote on the past or the future?
Well, I think the main thing is we need to have a look at people's lives. People are writing to me, one in particular at Burnley Savings and Loans, and said, Dave, I'd like to borrow some money to buy baby milk. So when you've got somebody applying for a loan to buy baby milk, right, we ended up giving them the money free. When you've got that on one side, and then on the other side, you've got bankers' bonuses being uncapped, you're then in a situation where we really do need change. Now, I think I've come up with a slight solution.
Have you got your own manifesto?
So, well, it's written in felt tip.
It's a rebel manifesto.
And it's, you know, you can write it on the back of an envelope, whatever you can write it on the back of an envelope. What we need is we need better services. We need people to be able to benefit better from society. And those at the top need to take the biggest burden. Those with the highest shoulders, the longest shoulders, need to take the biggest burden. But Sir Paul Tucker from the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee said £45 billion can be saved by cutting interest paid to banks. Now, they got in trouble with the quantitative easing. Goldman Sachs come out with that report this morning. You take that £45 billion, you put it into the NHS. But before you put it into the NHS, really importantly, we need to stop the water going through the bucket. So we need to plug the holes, find out where the money's going.
I think there is a fundamental...
hang on. And let's just remind viewers, because you opened a bank. It was the first time a bank had been opened in how many years?
We're opening the first new high street bank for 150 years in Britain. We've lent 34 million to thousands of people and businesses all
locally,
across the UK.
And they're local.
And I've just become the ambassador for the United States for community banks all across the United States of America.
Right, you're going to be busy. I mean, Reem, on that basis, what do you make of what Dave has said about £45 billion that could be saved by cutting the interest paid to banks?
I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding that the way in which you improve public services is by simply spending more money. And I think we've seen NHS budgets increase significantly over the last few years. We now spend just below £200 billion a year on the National Health Service.
Yeah, but could you save £45 billion from that?
I've not seen the report this morning, so I couldn't comment on that or on what the Monetary Policy Committee have said. But what I will say is I don't think we should be punishing banks or indeed punishing private businesses or indeed punishing those at the top of society, the wealthiest. You spoke about the cap on bankers' bonuses. That's effectively regulation that makes the UK, removing that regulation makes the UK more competitive. We want to encourage wealthy people to come here.
Well, to be honest, I mean, people say to me, well, Dave, if we cut these bankers' bonuses below 20 million, then they're going to leave. But I'd say, let them leave. There's so many people. When you've got on one side...
Why do you want wealthy people to leave the United Kingdom? You want us to be living in shacks, effectively. You want us to regress back.
Let me answer that, though. I feed 330 children every morning. They wrote to me, did the school headmistress of their little primary school in Colney, Lancashire, asking me, saying, the kids are coming to school hungry. So we've stepped in, we bought all the equipment they need and we pay for the food year by year, and we feed 330 children every morning. So on one side, you've got 330 children coming to school hungry, and on the other side, you're saying to me, we need to pay people 20 million bonuses. What I'm saying is...
Capitalism, the free market, businesses make people wealthier. The solution to poverty is better businesses. It's encouraging growth. It's encouraging economic growth and encouraging people to be here. If we start discouraging people from being here, we will see food shortages. We will see housing shortages.
What I'm saying is, I'm not discouraging people from coming. I'm not discouraging businesses from coming. But if they're going to come to the UK and they're going to take part in our wonderful economy, in our wonderful country, then they need to pay their fair share of taxes. And there's a lot of online companies and huge companies
let me bring in the politicians
who aren't paying their fair share, and we need people to pay their share.
Steve, there's a disconnect, isn't there, in terms of the view of the UK today, depending whether you're looking through the prism from Dave's perspective or Reem's. And that has happened, and maybe it's been exaggerated under 14 years of Conservative rule. And people now, if you fall into one or other category, don't feel politicians are going to improve their lives.
Well, yeah, but we have politicians and we have a government that's run by politicians. And if you can find me a better system of governance, then, you know, I'm all ears. That is our system.
But what about 45 billion? People think, gosh, 45 billion pounds that you could save from interest paid by banks.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the workings out behind that. But I mean, look,
I'll send them to you.
Please do. We have an election, and therefore it is perfectly right that there are opinions on the right and there are opinions on the left, and ultimately it comes down to people making a decision. And you're seeing a manifesto launched today where you're seeing a Prime Minister's talking about stability, talking about security, talking about the economy after an incredibly difficult time. And people have to decide, don't they, ultimately, whether in their heart they feel that Rishi Sunak's the man that they want to take forward with that, or Keir Starmer. And, you know, I am surprised that the polls haven't closed during this campaign so far. I think I said on the BBC on the night the election was called that I thought Keir Starmer was capable of making a mistake, that I thought the polls would close. That can still happen. The reason it hasn't is because there's no lens on Keir Starmer, because my party keep making mistakes, and then that takes the media headlines.
Well, I would say there has been a lens on Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and I hope we are doing that.
Later this week, maybe at manifesto time, there'll be more.
Well, there might be more, but we are starting to do it through the campaign with the material that we've got in terms of the manifestos being part of that. But when you listen to Reem and to Dave, who do you feel more connected to? Because the Labour Party, aren't going to do it. Well, but the Labour Party aren't.
I won't be offended, don't worry.
I will.
Well, there you go.
Pressure, John.
Because the Labour Party, broadly speaking, aren't offering anything vastly different. And actually, what Dave says is right. Reform is needed. That's what you're talking about, but not more money.
Hang on, well, let me just deal with the points that Dave made. And first of all, thank you, Dave, for supporting that primary school in Lancashire. I mean, I know Lancashire. I grew up in towards Bury. You can probably tell I've got a bit of the twang in
Centre of the universe.
Radcliffe, if you know it, Radcliffe.
Yeah.
But look, right, the point you're making is children should not be going to school.
No, absolutely not.
And that is why one of the policies we've put forward is to introduce free breakfast clubs in every primary school.
I like that.
That's one of our policies. And on your point about the NHS, yes, we want to completely close the non-dom loophole so that the super wealthy who come here should pay their taxes here, and we're going to use that money to deliver 40,000 extra appointments and treatments a week
It's a relatively
in the
small
NHS.
tax-raising measure. It's not transformative.
If you can't get out of the house because you need a knee replacement or a hip replacement, that's radically transformative for your life. Getting an appointment.
I recently went to Blackburn Hospital and filmed there for a few days, so I've got some real first-hand knowledge.
All right,
straight in.
But actually, one of the issues about these 40,000 extra appointments is where are the staff going to come from? Where are the medical staff going to come from? I just need to explain to viewers, you might be wondering why we're not talking in depth yet about the manifesto. We are hoping to talk to a minister too, but everything is running slightly behind. I just want to pick up on something Steve said about his hope, obviously, as a former Conservative MP, that you hope that the polls would close. Well, maybe this isn't going to help. The Financial Times headline is Tory ads warn voters of Labour landslide as election bid falters. Social media posts suggest voting for Lib Dems or Reform could give Starmer a massive majority. Here's one of them. You can see there from the Conservatives. If you vote Liberal Democrat, you'll hand Keir Starmer a massive majority and pay the price. The price tag there being the claim by the Conservatives that people will pay more tax. This is the second one. Keir Starmer needs your pension. Conservatives, if you vote Reform, Labour or Liberal Democrat, you'll hand Keir Starmer a massive majority. A massive majority. So you've conceded defeat.
Well, I don't write the ads, and anyone in Winchester who's followed my career over the last 14 years will know I don't do negative campaigning. I would much rather...
But this is negative campaigning against yourself. I mean, this is a... this means you've lost.
I don't believe that it does concede the defeat. I like to focus on the positive about what people are projecting and what people are saying. I've always done that locally and stood on my record locally, and I think the Prime Minister should do that, and that's what he's doing there at launching the manifesto today. In terms of, you know, the £2,000 figure, I mean, that's been kicked around a lot, and I think you will hear the Prime Minister double down on it a little bit more. He's basically added up all of these promises from the Labour Party. I noticed they're saying today about capital gains tax, no promises in the manifesto require a rise in capital gains tax, which is a very clever
But there have been plenty of
wording
examples, of course, of people breaching even manifesto promises over time.
It's a lie.
I know.
What Rishi Sunak is saying about Labour's tax plans, because Labour is not going to increase income tax, it's not going to increase VAT on national insurance. We're going to cap corporation tax where it is, unless we need to make changes to bring it down for international competitiveness. That is clear. That is our position. They are lying about Labour on tax, and the truth is this: every single one of their promises they cannot fund, they cannot identify the savings. It is a desperate wish list.
And in the end, the Prime Minister say there about some of the funding.
There hasn't. No, you obviously missed my press conference yesterday, Steve, when I went through every. I'll send you the YouTube clip where I went through every item of their supposed savings and explained how they're already in the government baseline. They're already funding the current changes to national insurance. These future promises they are making cannot be funded. And this manifesto is the most expensive piece of panic from the Tory party in history.
You say that, but Steve has just mentioned the issue of capital gains tax, tax on assets. It's the rates are lower than income tax. You were asked this. We showed it in the headlines. But let's have a look again. You were asked about 4 times, I think, and couldn't rule it out. Let's have a look.
Are you ruling out increases in capital gains tax?
Under a Labour government, there will be no increase in income tax, no increase in national insurance, no increase in VAT.
You've repeatedly been asked about, like capital gains tax, inheritance tax, fuel duty, is that you're thinking about raising them, thinking about the circumstances in which you might need to do so.
As you know, Chris, there's nothing in our plans that requires additional tax to be raised.
Will you look to address the kind of stealth tax that comes with frozen tax thresholds?
Look, our tax position is crystal clear. There is nothing in our plans that requires additional tax to be raised.
Right, can you rule out categorically, Jonathan, that you will not increase, capital gains tax in the next Parliament if you win the election?
Let me be absolutely clear again. We will not increase national insurance, income tax or VAT. There is nothing in our plans which require additional tax increases.
But that's not the answer to my question.
There is nothing in our plans that require additional tax increases. Every policy we put forward will be fully funded and fully costed.
Right.
In contrast, Rishi Sunak is making billions of pounds worth of commitments he cannot fund from savings he cannot find.
I'll come on to Steve.
Is not
no, but hang on, Jonathan. I'll come on to Steve, but I'm afraid, can you answer the question directly? And it doesn't matter if you can't rule it out, but are you ruling out increasing capital gains tax in the next Parliament?
Look, there's 1,000 different tax reliefs in the way these things.
And capital gains tax?
We've been very clear on income tax, VAT, and national. We are not.
I know. We are not. You pledged that, but you're not going to plot.
It's important that your viewers know that we've made a triple-lock commitment on taxation,
but not on capital gains tax.
We want to see the tax burden come down for working people because it's the highest tax burden for 70 years under the Tories. People are paying more in tax under the Tories. But we also know the Tories have completely wrecked the public finances because of what Liz Truss and the Conservative Party did to the public finances. And if Rishi Sunak gets in, we'll have 5 more years of this chaos and people will be paying more on their mortgage.
Dave, should there be higher rates of capital gains tax? Should they be increased on businesses, second homes and shares? They are taxed at less than income tax rates, and it would raise money.
What I'd like to see is levies on the big energy companies that make billions. I'd like to see levies on the banks. I'd like to see more of that, so that money can then drift back down into real society, and the poorest, and not just the poorest, Middle England are really suffering because they've been dragged with fiscal drag right up through the tax. So how do we get money from those at the top who have made billions and give it to those near the middle, not necessarily the poorest?
No, you're making the point that we need to be taking money from the top and bringing it down to the bottom.
And what's wrong with that?
But that's not how it works.
Well, it can work. It can work.
It could work that way, but ultimately what would happen is those at the top would stop making money here. What we want is to lift everyone up. We want to lift everyone up.
I'm a higher rate taxpayer and I pay it at the top. Now, I don't mind paying my share. When I go to the dentist, I pay privately, so I don't take somebody else's place. I've just put my wife in the hospital for something, a minor operation to be done. It cost £9,000, and I paid it, so I didn't take somebody's NHS place. I think those at the top should pay more
They
to
are
allow
already
anybody else have their turn.
Already paying more than enough. And I think what's really interesting about this is that if we want to encourage the UK to be a more competitive country, we need to be encouraging people like yourselves to be bringing business here. We currently have a corporation tax rate of 25% again,
which both parties
brought up by the Tories, by the Conservative Party, and we border a country, Ireland, that has a corporation tax rate of 12.5%.
I have 6
we
companies,
literally border
and
a
the
country
main
that
one
has
of
a
which
corporation tax rate that is half ours.
Yes, but
I have
we
6
do
businesses, one of which is in America, which is the biggest I've got. I pay American tax there and I pay the tax here on the dividend.
Right, and the other, if you're looking at comparisons, Reem, there are European countries comparable to ours where there are higher levels of income tax as well, and where growth has been higher at points over the last 14 years.
If somebody's put the tax up by 10% to me in America, 20% more, 30% more, I'm not going to pull my money from America. I can't see how anybody would pull the money from Britain. It's part of being the most wonderful country we've
like
got,
AstraZeneca
and people paying their...
pull investments, like companies like AstraZeneca pull investments as a result of high taxes.
Let me come to the sort of main pledge, if you like, of this manifesto, which is another 2p off national insurance. So we had 2p off, announced in January, I think it was, 2p off in April.
Tax on work.
And the polls didn't move in either of those events and when they were announced. Why are you flogging a dead horse with trying to do it again?
Well, because Rishi Sunak and the Conservative government believe in lower taxes on work.
Yeah, but it's not lower taxes because, Steve, we've already established that people have been paying more in tax, that they've been dragged into higher tax rates while the Conservatives have been in power. So cutting 6p off national insurance doesn't mean people are paying lower taxes overall.
And I haven't seen that manifesto that you've just been handed. You've got it before me because it's being announced as we're speaking. And I do think that the next government, of whichever colour, needs to address the fiscal drag. No point in saying you're not raising VAT. You're adding it to private school fees. That's a raise in not the headline rate of VAT, but that's
but they've announced
VAT,
that, yeah.
And you've announced that. So let's not pretend that isn't happening. But look, the richest with the broadest shoulders are already paying significant amounts of tax, and we have a faster growing economy than France, than Germany, than the United States. It's not true to say that this economy is wrecked and that public services are wrecked. They have big challenges for some of the reasons that I outlined earlier.
But the waiting lists are hideous, aren't they?
And when the industrial action was off the agenda, the waiting list started to go in the right direction, and the longer waits have already been cut down. But look, if you want to go into waiting lists, you know that I've spent quite a bit of time looking at them when I chaired.
No, but I'm answering your point about whether the public services are functioning well. If you just take the NHS and on that.
Part of the public services are functioning well. I've just told you that 90% of schools are good or outstanding, which they weren't when we came to office. There are parts of the health service that are functioning well. Productivity is still not back to it was at pre-pandemic levels, and that has to change. The industrial action is a drag weight on the NHS right now, and I despair at the BMA announcing new strikes just days before the general election. And, you know, I don't know what Keir Starmer's answer is to this. You know, he says get in the room. We've got in the room. There are 9% pay rise on the table, plus another 12% pay rise.
On that,
if all of your viewers are getting a 12% pay rise today, I'd love to hear from them, because I don't believe that they are.
Right, on that,
it's a fair offer.
Apart from getting around the table, I'll save you that line. What would you do in terms of resolving a strike?
No, we're not going to give them 35% because we are responsible with the public finances, unlike the Conservatives. And look, I mean,
that's why we haven't given them 35%.
I mean, just look at what we've got today. We've got more promises from Rishi Sunak when the money is not there.
Funded.
And what they're not funded.
Which promises are you talking about?
All these new tax changes he's splurging out there, and all these new policies he's splurging out there, even though they've been in power for 14 years. And people will be asking themselves, what has become of Rishi Sunak? I mean, he was supposed to be the antidote to the chaos of Liz Truss, and he's morphed into her in a panic, a desperate panic. The most expensive the most expensive manifesto in political history we've got today, and they cannot tell us where a single penny
piece is coming from. And your leader's describing it as a Jeremy Corbyn manifesto. That would be the Jeremy Corbyn he tried to make Prime Minister twice.
Let's just refer to this because we had it in the headlines. This is the Labour leader being asked for his reaction to the Conservative manifesto today. Let's just have a listen to what he said.
We have been absolutely clear that all our plans are fully costed, fully funded. We will not be increasing income tax, national insurance or VAT, so no tax increases for working people. None of our plans require tax rises. But this is coming from the party that's put tax to the highest level since, for 70 years. And they're building this sort of Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto where anything you want can go in it. None of it is costed. It's a recipe for more of the same.
a Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto.
Exactly, because we've got the highest tax burden, the highest tax burden in 7 decades.
And on
they cannot explain where a single penny piece credibly comes from, and they are splurging in a scattergun panic.
Well, hang on, Jonathan.
Let's just hang on. Jeremy Prime Minister twice. Keir Starmer sat in his shadow cabinet.
I tell you what, though, this manifesto is a panic, an expensive panic from the Tories. It's making all the mistakes of Liz Truss, and if he gets re-elected, it's 5 more years of chaos, and people will pay more on their money.
But sorry, just to illuminate viewers and to continue what Steve Bryan is saying, is it a good idea to remind voters of Keir Starmer's predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, whose uncosted manifesto using your words, you and Keir Starmer stood on in the elections of 2019 and 2017? And if you remember, you lost the 2019 election catastrophically.
Got hammered.
Yeah, standing on a manifesto that was uncosted by Jeremy Corbyn.
Keir Starmer's
signed off on by Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer's changed this Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn's not a candidate. Liz Truss is a Tory candidate.
But why would you remind viewers that you supported him?
Sunak won't take on the hardliners on his backbenchers. They will wreck the economy again. Keir Starmer has changed the Labour Party. That's firm leadership.
Right. I mean, as a reminder, you mentioned the Rebel Manifesto.
Yes.
Is that why there is talk? We might be able to show you the headline in The Guardian. Right-wing Tories plan Rebel Manifesto if Sunak's policy launch falls flat. And we're already hearing reports. Too timid, it's lame, it's not going to move the dial. Would you support a Rebel Manifesto?
Well, you can't be too timid and lame and also wildly uncosted and crazy and promising, stuff that's...
Well, these are Conservatives saying the former, Labour saying the latter.
Your next leader?
Yes.
Are you backing Sorella?
I fear, John, that she may be able to count on your support more than mine. But look, to my colleagues that are going around talking about the after of the general election, win or lose, I would say there is a job to hand. Get on with it. Get out and knock up the postal voters and stop indulging yourself on intellectual arguments which you frankly won't win.
Dave?
So, what we need, I feel, is it's no good just as pouring money into everything. If we carry on doing everything as we've done for the last year, the last 2 years, whatever, if we just do that next year by saying we're going to give more to the NHS, we're going to give more to this, more to that, we're just going to end up in the situation where if we think it's going to be different next year by doing the same thing, it's the definition of madness. What we need to do is plug all the holes in all the buckets first, look at where the spending was wrong, look at maybe even procuring things in the NHS. When I went into Blackburn Hospital...
Would you
procuring things
private
Hang on, let him finish, and then you can ask your question.
So, I went into the hospital and I met some really, really hard-working people. Them nurses and doctors and surgeons deserve triple.
Oh,
we can't afford to give them. We can't afford to give them that. But what I would do is look at the procurement, because some of the machines and things they were buying were tens and tens of millions of pounds. And with them being NHS, people see the word NHS and they think, right, we can charge more money. We need to get to the bottom of that. We need to bring them costs down, and then we've got some spare money to be able to...
Interesting. How you improve procurement across the public sector, I think is really, really interesting. Let's have a word after the show.
All right, well, you have a word after the show. Sorry, Green,
I've spent my life doing deals, and when somebody says a machine, a truck, a bus is 50 grand, I'll start at 25 and work my way up.
Governments of all stripes, but governments of all stripes are notoriously bad when it comes to systems and procurement. I just also want to show you that it's over, the manifesto launch at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to a minister. You can see them all gathering there as Rishi Sunak has departed the stage. Reem, you wanted to ask?
On this point, on the National Health Service, now Wes Streeting has, to my surprise at least, actually argued that these kind of private initiatives would work. Now, under the Labour governments of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, we saw internal market reforms, we saw market mechanisms being implemented into the National Health Service. Would you support that?
Rightly so.
Well, Wes has rightly said we want to use private sector capacity in the NHS. What is interesting, though, I can't remember if you wanted the intellectual discussion. Were you still the health minister when we did the NHS, or the government did the most recent set of NHS reforms, because it actually moved away from the more internal market mechanisms, actually took it back to something akin to the old district health.
I had fallen out with them over Brexit by then, John.
I couldn't remember, because we did shadow one another for a long time. I couldn't remember.
You and Wes are absolutely right to say that, continue the work of the Elective Recovery Task Force, use that capacity in the sector, paid for by NHS, by taxpayers' money, to beat down these waiting lists that were primarily caused by COVID.
Steve?
Absolutely. absolutely right.
Could you support the Labour Party? You sound on a couple of things that you're in agreement with.
Look, I'm not an active politician anymore. I've chaired a cross-party select committee for most of this Parliament. I look at the evidence, which where I had the conversation that we did about child obesity. No, I will support Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. I think they're thoroughly decent people who the country will be served well by going forward. But look, if people have got good ideas, and the poll suggests that this man may be
let's have a look at the poll.
Then I'll support the good.
Let's have a look at the latest BBC poll tracker. It's been out from today. Again, not much change. You can see Labour still well ahead, significant polling, just over 20 points. You can also see there that Reform UK are up to an average of 13.5%, rounded up to 14% on the graph in front of you. That's the highest they polled in this election campaign so far. Let's have a look at this tweet following on from that from James Johnson, the pollsters, because the tweet says Nigel Farage is now more popular than Rishi Sunak with Conservative 2019 voters. That was the coalition of Blue Wall and Red Wall, traditional Tory voters, and Red Wall in former areas that supported Labour. The latest post-D-Day poll finds Sunak with a net rating of +8 and Farage on +15 with this group. How worried are you by that polling, Steve?
Well, look, the polling is clearly not good, and the emergence of Nigel Farage, which I think the Prime Minister probably gambled on not taking part in this campaign, which would have been a dead cert if the campaign had been in November, as we'd all expected.
You don't need to be off in the US.
Is clearly because he'd have been in the US kissing the US president.
Nigel's contacted me.
I mean, clearly that's not good. I don't think there's any question to which more Nigel Farage is the answer. And actually, you know, I know the outgoing MP for Clacton because I've served on the Culture Committee with him for a number of years, and you know what? Being a constituency MP, as John knows, is hard work. He's going to have to do the real job. And it's not about making speeches or kissing up to US presidents. It's about doing the real job. And I just cannot see why he has the appeal that he has.
All right, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment because we finally have Kevin Hollinrake, Business Minister, at the end of that manifesto launch. Welcome to you, Kevin. We have talked briefly about some of the parts of the manifesto. Another 2 pence off national insurance. Again, why are you announcing that when the last two cuts haven't moved the dial at all?
Because it's the right thing to do. We want to offer lower taxes to working people, and people have been through a difficult time the last few years, but now we've got a clear plan for the future, a clear road ahead, and that clear choice people will have is choosing us, which is lower taxes for working people, 29 million people, 27 million employed people, 2 million self-employed people seeing a £1,500 a year tax cut. These are clear choices for people. It's the right thing to do. We're a party of lower taxes.
Well,
that's a direction
Kevin, I'll interrupt you there.
I'll
interrupt you there because you're not a party of lower taxes. Now, you may have reasons to explain it, but you're not a party of lower taxes under the last few Conservative Prime Ministers. Taxes have gone up for the majority of people because of those frozen tax thresholds. I just want to ask you about the funding of this 2 pence cut, another 6p in total of national insurance, because you've said you'll pay for it with £12 billion of savings from welfare by the end of the next Parliament. What are you going to do in the first few years to fund it?
Can I just tackle, I will answer that in a second, Joe, but can I just tackle that point about lower taxes? The average earner in the UK,
I said most people, Kevin.
It's lower than it's been. Lower it's been for the last 50 years. So that's not true to say we're not a party of lower taxes, but we also believe in balancing the books. In terms of that particular point, yes, we're going to reform the welfare system. We're going to get more people back into work, which is where they want to be.
By the end of the next
Parliament. Where we want
Parliament.
them to be. Absolutely. We're only putting it back, the situation back to where it was pre-pandemic. These aren't radical changes. It's just making sure we get more people back in the workplace. There are 9 million people in the UK of working age that don't work. We want to get people, more of those people back into the workplace. That's where they're needed. That's where they need to be.
But Kevin Hollinrake, that £12 billion worth of savings that you have earmarked to pay for this have already been allocated in the budget by Jeremy Hunt. It looks as if you are not going to have the money to fund this 2 pence cut when you've already allocated the savings, and we don't know if you'll deliver those savings, of course, on other things.
Oh, we don't believe that. We believe there are ways we can make efficiencies. In the manifesto, it sets out 36,000 fewer civil servants. We think it's right to make the civil service and the public sector more efficient, more productive. Again, these are just returning to productivity levels pre-pandemic. These are not heroic assumptions.
All right.
So we think these are deliverable.
Well, then let's look at the policies in the round since you've launched this campaign. You've had eye-catching policies on national service, on closing Mickey Mouse degrees, on the pensioner triple lock plus, and now this 2 pence. But all of those policies I've just announced haven't changed the polls. So what's going to change?
Well, this isn't about the polls for us. It's about doing the right thing.
Well, how are you going to win then if you don't change the polls?
These are tax cuts for workers, for employed people.
No, I understand that, but that's not my question.
27 million
I'm so
people.
sorry, but that's not my question. What I'm saying is the policies you've already announced have not moved the polls. They've not narrowed with Labour. They're still 21, 22 points ahead of you. So what makes you think this will, a 2 pence cut in national insurance? None of it has so far.
Well, it's not, I'll be clear, it's not just a 2p cut on working people. I think that is really important, and I think there is a cumulative impact of this. People have hardly seen those changes yet in their pay packet. They'll see this more and more as time goes on. They'll hear this announcement and see that they'll be £1,350 better off than they would be under a Labour government. The self-employed people, our cabbies, our chippies, our sparkies, our brickies, they'll be £1,500 better off as a result of these changes. 2 million of those. We're also making changes in terms of pensioners, making sure we don't move towards Labour's retirement tax, so we'll never tax the state pension. All these things will resonate with people, and we're just going to keep making the case. But they haven't so far. And people can see the difference between they will see the difference between our tax policies of lower taxes and Labour's policies of £2,000 more per household that you'll see under a Conservative
Well, of course, and
government.
that's been challenged and disputed. In fact, Jonathan Ashworth repeated that it's a lie. But we'll leave that just for the moment because we've done it ad infinitum or ad nauseum, whichever way you want to look at it. There was a moment in last night's interview with Rishi Sunak, being interviewed by my colleague Nick Robinson, in where he admitted that under Conservative governments, and under this one too, it's become harder to get on the housing ladder. That is under the Conservative government. Margaret Thatcher's home-owning democracy, it sounds like it's dead.
Well, there's no doubt there are problems in the housing market. There's no point in avoiding those particular problems. You know, we've seen rises in house prices, but we've the interventions we have made, so there'll be no stamp duty at all for first-time buyers. If they buy a house under $425,000, that's a tax break of up to £9,000. We know that's one of the biggest issues people have in getting onto the housing ladder. We're also we are making it easier. We also have a mortgage guarantee for people, so it's easier to get a mortgage. Help to buy being put
but
back
Kevin,
in place.
why would people, particularly young people, trust you with improvements in housing when we've had the Prime Minister admit it's harder under Conservative governments to get on the housing ladder?
Well, we are seeing an increase. There was a record number of first-time buyers actually entered the market.
But he's admitted it's harder. Why would people trust you to improve it?
There are difficulties. We're not saying there are not difficulties.
On your watch.
We've been honest about that. But, well, of course, house prices have increased. Of course, it's more difficult
because you haven't built enough
as a result
homes.
of increasing house prices. But we built 1 million houses in this Parliament. We're going to build 1.6 million houses in this Parliament without the
and it's still
sprawling estates on our greenfield land.
All right.
But these are all measures for the future, Joe. Stamp duty, mortgage guarantee, making it easier, help to buy, all those things. 1.6 million homes, a record number of affordable homes built last year. There are many successes we've seen under this government. We just know we need to go further.
Kevin Hollinrake, thank you very much. Dave, very quickly, what did you make, particularly on the housing?
I think it's important for people to get on the housing ladder. Other letters we get a lot of is people struggling to get the deposit. Now, Burnley's just been announced as the most affordable place in the country to buy a home for round about £100,000. Now, they were talking there of £400,000 houses, you know, that by 4 in Burnley. So I'm thinking perhaps we can get a better transport system up to places like Burnley. People can buy homes there and then work across the country.
Well, HS2 didn't quite work. But anyway, that's all we have for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more Politics Live at 12:15. Please join me. Bye.
The BBC World Service is a